Coming Together to Save a Missing Boy with Victor Shine, episode 243. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and today I have a treat for you. Not because of the subject matter of the story that brought this podcast to bear, because that little boy, unfortunately, was the one person who maybe got hurt the most in this story, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But really, it's created this opportunity for us to, number one, hear the story and have a feel-good opportunity, but more importantly than that, to take the lessons that we can learn from what has transpired and turn it into life lessons and business lessons that we can use and apply in our day-to-day activities. When I heard this story, I said, we absolutely need to get this out on the show and in the air. I think that you're going to be mesmerized by the actual story, but I think that you'll also be mesmerized by the follow-up conversation that we're going to have. So let me just give you the quick backstory here. A few weeks before this was recorded, I don't know when it's going to be released, so it was probably more than a few weeks, but if you Google child found in Brooklyn, you'll find the news articles. It's well covered by ABC 7 New York and ABC7NY.com, NBCNewYork.com. We'll actually link up to those news articles in the show notes of the podcast. But basically, the story is that a camp was on some sort of trip, and somehow a 7-year-old boy was left behind when they left, and he was missing. They couldn't find him, and a search ensued. And so this boy was from the Jewish Orthodox community in Brooklyn. And volunteers, hundreds, maybe thousands of volunteers came to help search for this boy. And the search ensued. And there's a fellow by the name of Victor Shine who I'm going to play a clip from him in a moment to you. But basically, through whatever happenstance, decided to go. He was contemplating not going. He decided to go and help search for this boy, and went and even though the search party was waiting for instructions from the commander, he went out on his own looking. And at some point, he heard a boy call out, and he knew the phone number of a commander who was who was in charge of the search, and he happened to call the commander and tell him that he heard the boy cry out, couldn't find him, but send people over there. They came, and ultimately that's how they found this 7-year-old boy, and he is fine. The boy is fine, probably traumatized. I don't know what kind of emotional scarring he's going to have from his experience, but ultimately it's at the end of the story is that he was found. So the first thing, what happened is Victor recorded a 5-minute audio clip the morning after, basically reflecting on this experience that he had, where he wasn't planning on going to look for this boy, finally decided to go and do it. And then everything that fell into place of how his decisions clearly being helped along the way to make those in order for this boy to be found, because he was the one who had the phone number to the person that needed to send the team over with the right searchlights and everything to be able to discover him. It's just an incredible story. And he recorded this audio clip with his reflections on it, which I'm going to play for you now.
I heard they needed volunteers about 6:30, and I was debating whether I should go. It was overcast. I'm an older guy. What difference could I make? And I really wasn't going to go, but then I thought about my 6-year-old grandson. And if it was him, I'd want every single person out there searching till he was found. So I got dressed in sneakers and a ball cap and a white shirt with long sleeves so I could be easily seen and also protected from the elements. And I got in my car and drove. And I felt a little bad because I was skipping Mincha, the afternoon prayer service, but I knew that I had to do it, so I actually prayed while I was driving. Sorry, Rabbi. Anyways, I got to the scene, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people, mostly milling about, waiting at the command center in the Patergat marshes. And they were drawing up a grid, and I didn't want to wait. I just wanted to go. So I went. And I just started walking, searching with my flashlight. I had binoculars, not that they did me any good. And most of the crowd was behind, waiting for instructions. And, people had been searching there for hours to no avail. So I walked under the bridge by the Belt Parkway, up and down the beach, calling out his name, Yosef, Yosef. Come, we have pizza and ice cream for you. We're looking for you. And there was no answer. And I'm walking around maybe an hour and a half. And I was getting tired. And I'm like, I really shouldn't stay out here too long. I got to watch my own health. So I started going back. And then I saw a dirt path. And I turned onto the dirt path. And I was calling out, Yosef, Yosef. And I heard a child's voice say, Ta. So I started saying, is that you? Is that you? And I didn't hear anything else. And I looked behind me and there was another guy there. He said, did you hear that? I said, yeah, I heard it too. So he went rushing off into the marsh, youngster that he is. And I happened to have the cell phone number of the top cop who was running the search, Richie Taylor. He's deputy inspector, big guy in the NYPD. So I called him, and he didn't answer, and I called him, and I was like a crazy person calling him over and over again. And finally he picked up. I said, Richie, I heard something. You got to send some units here. So it took about 15 minutes, and a couple of ATVs showed up, and then another 5 minutes later, a big truck with a massive light showed up, and everybody was asking me, where did you hear him? How did you hear him? Where were you standing? Where did it come from? And I just stood there. And I felt stupid because what if I'm taking resources away and I didn't really hear anything? Anyways, so once they had my location, I asked if it's okay to go. So I started walking out. And about 2 minutes later, I hear a big shout. And some people around me said, they're singing, they're dancing. So I ran back to where I was, and I got the volunteer, the Hatzalah guy. And I asked him, did they find him? He says, yes, they found him. I said, is he okay? He says, I don't know. So then I ran back to where the base camp was, with the ambulances and whatnot. And they were just bringing him out. And I was so thankful. So, I didn't stay around for much. I danced with everybody. I think that made it on the news. But then I went back to my car because it was pouring. We were getting soaked in buckets. My clothing is still completely drenched. Anyways, I get a phone call from Richie Taylor. He says, Victor, you were the major break in this case. Your tip brought us to the right place. And I can't even tell you how shaken I remain. Even this morning, it just shows that one person can make a difference. Just go, just do. My mother used to say, go and do. That's, who am I? I'm some old 56-year-old guy, And it apparently made a difference right when they were giving up hope, right when the sun was already set and the rain started coming down and eliminating any trail. You just keep going. You just do and don't worry about looking stupid or feeling stupid. You just do. And I'm so thankful that I got to be part of the story and that boy is okay and the family's okay and Klal Yisrael's going to be okay.
Okay, now that you heard that clip, I want to go now, turn back and introduce our guest. Victor, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Number one, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this recording with me. People, they don't realize when we do these recordings, it's 10 o'clock at night. I got the kids to bed. I don't know how late you normally stay up, but I really appreciate you making the time, even in this odd, crazy hour, to have this conversation. But I'm excited about it because this is just an incredible story. And the first thing that I want to do is give you an opportunity to, if you want to add anything to my introduction or the audio clip you've already recorded, that maybe now 3 weeks later, you might want to expand on what you've already shared.
Contrary to popular belief, I did not personally find the child. I want to make that very clear. I was out there with hundreds and hundreds of people who were searching in incredible conditions. It was dark. It began to rain. There was lightning. There was thunder. Not your average day at the beach, although it was at the beach under the Belt Parkway. And I also have to recognize the fact that there were literally thousands of people across the globe who were praying for the safe return of this boy. And I cannot minimize that, because I feel as a religious person that every single person who participated, whether they were a professional, whether they were a volunteer, everybody had a hand in saving this boy. So that's the main point I want to make.
And I think that it's what's incredible is that, I mean, with this point that you make, that everybody had a hand in finding him, is that often this is a good way to, have you ever heard of bystander syndrome?
Can't say
So
that.
there's a concept called bystander syndrome. So basically, if somebody's in distress and they scream out help and one person sees them, the likelihood of that person going and calling for help is very high, almost 100%. But if there's a group of people and somebody screams out help, each person is going to say, the next person is going to call for help. Why should I? And bystander syndrome is basically this phenomenon that happens that when there's a group of bystanders, somebody will go without help because the bystanders are all expecting somebody else to take action. And that's really how we are as people. So when you have people that come together where everybody collectively is there to take action, you have the opposite effect of bystander syndrome. And that's when things happen. And that's when results are able to be had. It doesn't always end in a happy result. It doesn't always end in a happy ending. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, but the response is incredible. And what I wanted to do in our conversation is to try to extrapolate from these experiences, like what can we learn from this? When somebody's out there running their own business, they're not among a group of bystanders, right? So what does this have to do with them? And I think that probably from what you said in your recording, the fact that you actually decided to go and take action, and the fact that when you got there, you were antsy. You're like, I didn't come here to stand around and wait for instructions. I'm just going to go, and I'm going to start looking. I'm going to, even if I'm not following the grid or whatever it is, I'm just going to go. And maybe that's not the best thing for somebody to do in a search in the dark and the rain or whatever it is, right? But you took action and ultimately ended up in getting a result. And I think that so many people just stand on the side waiting for the opportunity to take action. And maybe they're in this bystander syndrome. Maybe they're like, just somebody else is going to go and do it. And there's nobody else doing it for you.
Moshe, I got to say, I'm just like any other regular guy. I just came home from work and I really didn't want to go. I wasn't going to go. I was asking my wife permission because I was hoping she would say, don't go. And that would give me an out. But she didn't, because she lets me do whatever harebrained crazy things I want to do. And it was when I thought about my own grandson and like, what if it were him? And she's like, don't say that. And I said, that's really the point, isn't it? because we're all connected. And what makes that boy's life any less valuable than my own family? And that's when I knew I had to go, so I geared up and I went. So um, if you want to tie this back into business, um, I have learned a lot from how many businesses I started and failed. I got a ton of knowledge now about what not to do. I could go on for quite a while about all the businesses that my wife and I have started that have failed, but fortunately they didn't all fail. So
Right.
just do it. My mother was famous for just saying, go and do. Just don't worry about it. Don't worry about the consequences. Don't worry about what if it's not going to work. What if I'm going to feel stupid? What if I'm going to look bad? What if I lose all my money? It's something that you gotta prepare yourself. You got to do it smart. When I started one of my businesses, I called up a place called SCORE. It's the Senior Corps of Retired, I don't know,
Executives, probably.
executives. Yes.
Yeah.
My advisor actually died while we were in the middle of coming together with a plan. I mean, this is an old guy. He was volunteering. He had nothing better to do. And some of his advice was spot on, and some of it was completely dated because, he was like in his 90s or something. But, I did my best, even though I had already had, decades of experience of my own. I wanted to get somebody's advice. So,
Right.
I just try everything. I can't tell you how many different ways that I've tried to market or tried to get sales or whatnot, and surrounded myself with other people and just listen as much as I can. But again, the point is just try, just go, just do it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened
And this, when you turned to your wife and said, this could be my grandchild, right? This could be, and I would want other people to do what I'm now debating whether I should do, because that was my grandchild out there. One of the things that I do is I'm a paramedic, and I once had, I was doing a promotion. I was selling an expensive coaching program, and somebody sent in an email to our support desk. And the email basically said, I don't understand why Moshe's working as a paramedic if he's so successful as a business coach. Right. And when I got that, I turned to Mimi, who's on my team and happens to be my daughter. And I turned to her and I said, they just don't get it. Somebody who asks that question doesn't get my brand. They don't get who I am. They don't, if you don't get who I am, then we're never going to mesh together. But the reality is that I do what I do because of exactly that. Because what if that was my family member? What if that was my child? What if it was my grandchild? And I want to do whatever I can to help other people. I do that in my business, and I do that in my hobby as a paramedic, right? And I do that in my day-to-day life, just going around. Like there's people asking for help all the time, whether it's a beggar on the street corner or whether it's somebody that, they're sitting on the side of the road with their hazards on. How many people stop to help them, and how many people just drive by? Bystander syndrome, right? So the reality is that when we see a community come together to search for somebody, to find somebody, because each of them is making that decision, because what if this was my child? What if this was my grandchild? I'm going to go and I'm going to help. The exact opposite of what is ingrained in our personalities. We're all wired the same way. We're all wired to think somebody else will take care of this, which is why you contemplated not going. But at the same time, that so many people came out for this search and ultimately ended up in a positive result and a happy ending, is all boils down to the fact that they were willing to do something that is not ingrained in us to go against our nature and against the way that we're wired. And the reality is that that's what it's all about. Because when you look at all the business decisions and everything that you always contemplate with, when you're worried about the what ifs, which you just, you outlined really well, right? What if I lose all my money? What if it doesn't work? What if I look stupid? What if I look unprofessional? What if I get disbarred? There's all these what ifs that we create. The reality is that they're all not true. They're all potential possibilities of an ending. But the only way to find out how it ends is to do it. And if we don't do it, we're then assuring that it won't happen. If you didn't go to look, and neither did 500 other people, or whatever that number is, right? If nobody showed up for the search and it was just a police unit, they might have started with a lot of police officers or search and rescue or whatever it is, fire department, whoever it is that comes out. But after an hour of searching, they might have dropped down the number of units. They might, they're not as vested in this as the people who showed up to look, right? And if those people hadn't showed up, it would have been a totally different experience. Now, maybe the boy would be found anyway. We don't know. But the reality is he wouldn't have had nearly as great a chance than what actually transpired. And that's what, when it comes to business or even anything else that you're doing, if you're not willing to take the risk and face the what ifs, then you're guaranteeing that the result is going to have less chance of survival.
I want to add something since we're talking about how this applies to business. There were some people who reacted negatively to this story. What kind of camp would lose a kid? Who's responsible? And I always quiet that kind of talk because I spoke to the father of the boy, and he and I are right on the same page. We were worried about how the head counselor feels, how that kid's counselor feels. They were crushed. And we had to let them know, this was not something that could have been prevented. I want you to know that this particular camp was known for how safe and secure they are and how good care they take of their child. This was all God, So agree or disagree, but the fact is, focusing on who to blame gets you absolutely nowhere. I was on a talk radio show, and the host asked me, well, if this was your first search and rescue, will you be going out to the next search and rescue? Fair question. I said, what if this doesn't have to happen again? What if we can learn from our mistakes and plan so that, I don't know, maybe we have a list of protocols. So we have buddy systems and head checks and counts before the buses leave. What if we had drones with infrared cameras? What if we had GPS tiles that each kid has on his neck that sounds an alert if he breaks perimeter or tells us where he is if he does get lost? What can we do to address this so this doesn't have to happen next time? So I think the idea of a post-mortem in a constructive way instead of a blame game way is so important in business, in life. Figure out what you did wrong, figure out what you could have done better, and try to prepare and plan for next time. I do that in business. I do that in my life. I've failed tons of businesses, believe me. I got millions of dollars down the drain, usually my own money. But the things that I learn, I can carry forward and be successful with. Never waste your time on getting angry or finding blame. It's not helpful.
Yeah, I love that takeaway, and I love that parallel. I have to admit, I'll admit it here publicly, that thought definitely crossed my mind. How did the camp do that? Like, how did the camp lose a kid? How does that happen?
But it keeps happening. Correct. I can give you case after case. This was the 10th anniversary of the abduction of a child who was found in pieces. And everybody had that on their mind because it was also from our community. And I was there when the chief was telling the people, go house to house, search car trunks, search freezers, because of what happened 10 years ago, almost to the day. And it was spooky. And it really motivated me to really get out there and stay out there until we find this kid.
Yeah, unfortunately, I remember that very clearly as well, because I was good friends with the brother of the sick person who did that. So it's it doesn't always have a happy ending. That's for sure. But again, this, doing a post-mortem, I think that reflecting on the results of whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish is extremely important. And one of the things that I share all the time is that no matter what action you take, it's never a failure. People say, what if I fail? And the problem is that failure is your interpretation or meaning that you're applying to the amount of success that was achieved. If you didn't achieve the result that you wanted, that doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means that there's a lesson to be learned. And as long as you learn a lesson, it was still a success because you've learned a lesson from it. And when you learn enough lessons, you'll be successful to the way that you're defining success. Who says success is making a profit? Maybe success is not making a profit, right? Who gets to decide that? Well, that's the meaning that you're attaching to what you're doing. Now, I'm not saying go out there and work your business for 10 years with the intent of never making a profit. I mean, you can call it a non-for-profit and you'll be fine, right? But what I am saying is that there's no such thing as failure. The only failure that you can have is not trying in the first place. But then once you try, always have this process of going back and reflecting on what you've done, because there's so much to be learned. Even when you achieve the result you wanted, there's so much to be learned. We do a debrief here internally. So we have these marketing launches where we, like, for example, we do a virtual conference called the Law Firm Growth Summit. And what we do is at the end, when that event is over, we have this massive debrief where we go through everything that happened, the numbers that we achieved, how they matched up to the goals that we set, where were there things that worked very well, and where were there things that didn't work well at all. And then we go through all the surveys of the attendees that's filled out a survey, and all the surveys of the speakers. And going through that process allows us to create a list of what do we get rid of, what do we keep, and what do we double down on? What do we do next time to make it a better experience for the user? And what do we do to make it a better experience for the speakers, the sponsors? And we go through all of that to then elevate the next event. And if we keep doing that, we're just going to continue to make a better product. And I think that you can do that with your law firm. I think that you can do that with every single client that comes through the door, every single marketing effort that you make, whatever it is that you're doing, you can go back and look and say, what were the results I got? And does it make financial sense? Should I continue this? If I shouldn't, okay, let me put the kibosh on it. That's a win too, knowing not to put money on this, right? On the other hand, if it's working, it's just not working as well as I'd like, where are the places that there's room for improvement? And let's start making tweaks and fix those things.
Very true.
So do you know what the condition of the boy was when he was found? I know that he was really cold. I don't know. They said that he was sleeping, or so was that? Do you know if he was unconscious or semi-conscious because of the cold and the rain and all that, or if that was just he just fell asleep because he was waiting?
So my information is just about as good as yours, because again, I did not find the boy. I heard the boy, I called it in. But my understanding is that he was near the beach, hiding under a bush. He heard people calling his name. He didn't answer them because he was taught not to answer strangers. And he was semi-conscious. He was evaluated in the hospital for more than just physical damage. They had to make sure that he hadn't been taken and possibly abused. Right. And they fortunately found out that that was fine. He's a quiet kid to begin with. He really didn't talk much. But when he got home from the hospital, he wanted to sleep in his own bed. He didn't want to sleep in mommy's bed. They gave him a big deli sandwich. A friend of mine, Josh Melman from the Flatbush Jewish Community Council, was actually in the house with the father, just waiting it out with him with the rest of the kids, while the mother was on scene waiting for news of what had happened. But it was actually Josh who lit a fire and got the higher ups in the police department involved, because he's very connected. And I think his actions probably accelerated the timeline, because there was an effort to find the boy beforehand, but it wasn't on the same scale as when that text went out after 6 p.m. and say, we got to accelerate this because the sun's setting and it's been too long. you know.
Yeah, I mean, once it gets dark, it's a whole different ball game. I mean, it's more scary, and it's, the kid will fall asleep. It's harder to find. Their chances of him responding to you are less. It's harder to see. You can't find somebody.
One more thing I want to add is one thing I was doing when I was out there that I didn't see anyone else doing. I was carrying his picture around in my phone that had been distributed by the police, and I was stopping complete strangers and saying, "If you see this boy, please call 911. He's lost." I didn't see anyone else doing that, but we actually had some complete strangers, bystanders, get involved in the search simply because they were asked. Most of the looky-loos had no clue what was going on. I mean, you have to picture this: hundreds and hundreds of cars, emergency vehicles, command centers, those big RVs. You couldn't get down the street. If you look at East 76th Street, it's a little tiny street that goes one way, and the cars were triple parked. It was insane. But there was a lot of people out there. They didn't even know what was going on, just the people who live down there near Seaview
Right.
Avenue. So again, if we're going to relate this back to business, bring people onto your team. Get people, pointed in the same direction as you, in the same page as you, convert them to your mission, because nobody can do this by himself, no matter what it is. When I was in fashion retail and I used to mentor people who were trying to start their own label, you can't do everything. You're going to design and cut and fit and sew, and then you're going to market and sell and, handle the returns. You're one person. You got to get people on your team, and you got to have a division of labor, because no one single person can get anything done, no matter who you are.
Yeah, and I think the other takeaway that along the same lines of team is make sure that you have people on your team that are capable and that you have empowered to be willing to go outside the box, to be willing to try some things out on their own without getting reprimanded that they did something wrong, because the police commander, their job is to make sure every single square foot is covered. So they're creating this grid. They're going to assign people to the grid. They're going to make sure that every single spot is, has been searched. Where that along comes Victor, and he's like, I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to go and I'm going to go. I know this park pretty well. I'm just going to walk and I'm going to see if I can get a result, because there's plenty of people there that are going to be involved in the grid search. Let me see if I can try to find this kid faster by just walking around.
I was never there before, just to be clear. My first time.
So as we're thinking about this, like, did you do something right or did you do something wrong? And I don't think it's right and wrong, by the way. I think that's, but when I am running a business and I have an employee who goes and tries something, they're doing it that's outside of the plan, outside of the scope of what we've outlined as their job description, be very careful about squashing that, right? That you don't want a rogue employee just willy-nilly doing what they want, but at the same time, you do want them to be able to try to find a better way of doing something.
I spent most of my career as a C-level executive. I mean, we started in technology before there was a web. And it was always my biggest point when I'm hiring someone is to find somebody who thinks for themselves. Hire people smarter than I am, let them do their thing, and encourage them along the way, give them the resources they need, and just let them go. And never, ever second guess them or question them. Certainly not in an accusatory way, because you can't stifle that creativity, especially in the services industry, which is where I've spent my life. You have to be able to trust your people. Do not micromanage them. Set basic goals. This is what we have to accomplish. Let them do it their own way. Let them surprise you with their creativity. So I think that the same thing is true here. You just have to. There's a need for a grid. There's a need for professionals, the guys in the vests, and even the professional volunteers, I'll call them, like you're a medic, you have training. Things have to be done a certain way. But I didn't skip out to wait around. And once I saw the hundreds and hundreds of people they had at their disposal, I knew that one more body isn't going to make a difference. I just had to go. I couldn't wait around. It wasn't in me. So I just had to get out there and do whatever I thought was right. And I probably covered ground that tens of other people had already seen. And I got to tell you this, in case it wasn't apparent from the story, I was on my way back to my car. I was done because, I'm not 20, I'm 56.
I was going to
So
say, you're 22. You're not 20.
the
You're 22.
rain was coming down. And I do have to guard my own health first because my health does come before the next person. But it was on the way back to my car that I had seen this dirt path that I didn't notice before. And I said, let me try one dirt path. I'd been on the beach, I'd been on the bicycle lanes. I'll try one dirt path. And that was the one that led to hearing this child's voice. And he was found very shortly after. So I almost felt guilty. Okay, these people are out here searching, and I'm going to, cut bait and leave. But that's what I'm doing.
And what's also interesting is that the reason you found him was not because of you looking, right? Because you didn't find him, right? You heard him, and that wouldn't have happened if you weren't out there calling his name. And for some reason, he might have thought that he heard his father's voice, right? And I think that that's pretty incredible if you think about it, because it wasn't just the fact that you were out there searching, but it was the technique that you were using, right? And maybe other people were out there searching, but perhaps they weren't using the same technique. Perhaps they weren't out there calling his name. Perhaps they weren't showing his picture to other people, right? So it's not just that there's all these people going through the motions, but each of them might have a different way of doing it. So you have to allow all these people to put their input into the mix to get the right concoction to have success.
I actually tried to put myself in his headspace. What would I do and feel and think if I were lost and alone for a long time, probably hungry, probably thirsty? It wasn't honestly that cold. I mean, it is the summertime, but what would he be thinking about? Probably he's hungry. So I said, we have pizza and ice cream. Come, we have for you. Let's, hide and seek is over. It's time to come in and go home. I was just thinking like a child, which I'm not ashamed to say. I have some pretty happy memories of my childhood. And I've got children and grandchildren, so I try to think like them, and I guess that worked. For all I know, I heard some other kids say. I don't know. But I did have my hearing checked. It's 100%. And I told the doctor, the audiologist, that under HIPAA rules, he cannot tell my wife.
She needs to think that I'm on the borderline of needing hearing aids.
That's right.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Yeah, but that's the whole story is just incredible. But putting yourself in the headspace of a child, we can correlate that right back, right? How do you find your leads? How do you make your sales? Because you always put yourself in the position of your client. How do you end up with a happy client at the end? Put yourself in the position of the client. Like, what does the client need? What's their challenges? What's their worries? And if you're addressing those in your marketing, and you're addressing those in your sales conversation, and you're addressing those during the time that you're servicing them, that's what leads to a successful business. So it's the same exact thing.
Yeah, I mean, just having been in business for over 30 years, it's usually about money, like either saving it or making it. That usually speaks pretty strongly to a business person. But my wife and I have learned that work-life balance is really more important. We give our employees off 10 weeks a year, paid, including early Fridays. If you add the hours up, we close the business twice a year for the Jewish holidays, and we pay our entire staff. We still give the regular holidays and New York City sick days and whatnot. We close the business at 5:01 to ghost town. Come back, do the rest tomorrow. Go home to your family. That was a difficult lesson to learn, especially when I was involved in technology, involved in telecom. Hedge funds that are servicing Hong Kong, they don't want to turn their phones off at midnight. I'd have to be out till 3 a.m. and then be back at my desk at 9. That was not a happy time. I didn't get to
Right.
see my kids growing up so much. But there's more to life than money. But usually in business, people want to know how you're going to save them money, how you're going to save them time, which is money, and how are you going to conserve their time and money? How are you going to increase their sales? That type of thing.
I think
Just
it's
going back to the
I think it's incredible that sorry, I spoke over you. I apologize.
no, that's quite all right. Just going to give you one example. When I entered telecom, um, I was working for an Avaya reseller,
Hmm.
telephone systems for big places, and I wanted to introduce something new. I showed my boss something that was brand new at the time. It was called Google AdWords. Nobody had heard
Hmm.
of it. Nobody knew what to do with it. I said, you know what? I'll fund it myself, $1 a day maximum. And I was trying to explain to him about pay per click, and he didn't want to know. He was old school. So I put up a website and I put a special direct inward dial number. If you dialed this number, the only place you could have gotten it is from that website. And I only advertised that website on Google AdWords. I wasn't even doing A/B testing, analytics, nothing. Very, very straightforward. And I actually got a call from Google themselves when they moved to 111 8th Avenue. They were looking for a phone system. And here I was, this brand new sales guy who had the audacity, you know, to try something new. And I reached into my own pocket for $30 a month and I landed Google.
Right.
So, or at least a sales call with Google. They took it away from me because I was too new.
Oh,
That's a story
geez.
for a different time. But
Did they make the sale at least, or did they botch it?
they botched it. They botched it. The short version of that story is when they took it away from me, the guy was old school, and Google wanted to buy of all. I don't think I can. I have an NDA that I signed. I probably can't say the details, but Google had a certain price, and the guy wouldn't even let me be involved just to have the feather in my cap that I landed Google, and he kept me out of the whole proposal. And when he told me finally, after much pestering, that he had submitted the proposal, I said, "What did you charge per endpoint?" And he told me. And I said, "Let me show you something." And I Googled buying that same phone on Google. And it was much less than he had quoted. And I said, "You think Google is going to use Google to see what the price should be?" And he says, "I guess we lost that sale." I said, "I guess you did." So, the guy who has all the experience isn't
Right.
necessarily the guy who could land. I could have landed that deal. I would have given the phones away just for the service business.
Right.
But I wasn't
Absolutely.
bitter about it because I knew in my heart that I landed Google spending $30 a month,
Right.
So, get out there, try it. There's always something new. And the flip side of that is I was spending $15,000 a month on marketing when we started Yona, New York, our high fashion apparel for inclusive size. And self-proclaimed gurus. They were telling me how to use Google AdWords. And I let them, and it was a complete waste. And I had people from the biggest names, and I'm not going to name them because that's not my job here.
Right.
To badmouth anyone. But I knew more than they did. And I let them convince me that they knew more than I did. And I didn't go with my gut. And I was wasting tens of thousands of dollars every single month in marketing. They got me millions of eyeballs, granted. It got me tens of thousands of clicks. It got me all of 22 sales. So go with your gut. Don't let people sell you stuff.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Except for Moshe, of course. Moshe could sell you stuff.
No, you know what? Don't buy from me if it's not for you, right? If you're going to send an email saying, I don't understand what you're doing as a paramedic, don't buy from me, please. I think that people, I tell my law firm clients, there's no such thing as competition. You can be a criminal lawyer. There could be 100 other criminal lawyers in the same office building as you. They're not your competition, because people want the package. They want you and your experience and your track record and your star rating on Google and whatever it is, all those things put together. And somebody who hires you is hiring you because of that package, not because you're a criminal lawyer. And I think that that's the same lesson here, right? you got to figure out how to be you, and you got to figure out how to do you, and you have to stay strong with that, and you have to listen to your gut. And if somebody resonates with you, if a coach resonates with you and they're the right person to look up to and to run things by and to figure out am I headed in the right direction, then you invest in them. And if a marketing company, you connect with them and you believe that they are gonna create the result that you want, you invest in them. You don't allow somebody to sell to you. You make decisions based on what you feel and what you know you need and what you're seeking. I tell my coaching clients all the time, I said, because they always ask me like, oh, should I invest in this? Did you call them or did they call you? Right? If you called them, then let's talk about it. If they called you, you don't need it.
Wow, that's great stuff.
So
I have to double down on what you're saying. Not only is there no competition, but very often your competition can be your allies. And we did this when we were invited to walk for the Mercedes-Benz Small Business Runway in Philadelphia. And I was trying to get this idea out that beauty is not about size.
Mhm.
It's about, including everyone, because
Right.
2/3 of American women are size 14 and above, but only 20% of apparel is made for size 14 and above. And when they invited us, we were the only plus or inclusive size designer. And I said, I really don't feel this is right. I want to include other plus size designers to walk with us. Long story short, I'm calling my competitors, telling them that I've gotten them to drop the designer fee to participate and come walk with us in Philly for Mercedes-Benz. And at first, once they got over this understanding that their competitor was calling to help them, because we were all brand new back then.
Right.
One of them says, I love this idea of helping each other.
Collaboration.
And collaboration. Let me introduce you to Macy's. It wasn't a good fit for us. Maybe it'll be a good fit for you. That was Alexandra Waldman of Universal Standard, who's a dear friend and a wonderful human being and a friendly competitor.
Mm-hmm.
So there are all kinds of opportunities in your business. Your competitor is not necessarily your competitor. My wife, Yona, in her firm, in her consulting, she has groomed people to start their own businesses. She provides them with leads and they call her up and ask her for advice. And these are people who trained under her. Now you'd think that's counterintuitive. Why am I setting up somebody to compete with me? But the truth is, you don't call Yona when you need something simple. You call Yona when you're in real trouble. You got a multi-million-dollar project on the line and it's got to be resolved today or this week or whatnot.
Right.
And by helping, she's now expanded her network of referrals, because when it's something that's over this guy's head, who's he going to call? You need to call Yona. So don't be afraid of competition. Embrace it and become part of that network. There's plenty of trades, networking opportunities, meeting with people in your business. They're human beings too. They're facing the same challenges you are. And sometimes just by riffing together and brainstorming and spitballing together, you can help each other. So again, don't worry about the competition. Embrace them is my message.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Our Law Firm Growth Summit is a perfect example, right? When we have 35 speakers at the summit, probably 20 of them at least are coaches, just like I am. Like, why am I inviting them to speak at my event? And the truth is that I don't think that I know it all. I don't think I have all the answers. I don't think that I am the be all and end all. I could spend 3 days talking to people for 3 days straight, but I could bring them so much more value by bringing so many amazing people together and each of them is giving their best stuff. And then what did I create for 3 days? I created something way bigger than me. And, I think that I see it in my law firm clients, because how many times does somebody else have a conflict where they can't serve somebody, or it's too big or too small, or it's, the wrong part of the niche that you can handle. And when you start to create these relationships, you also might have something you need to send off to somebody else. Right. And it suddenly creates this opportunity for business to flow in both directions. And there's no shortage of attorney to attorney referrals. And that only happens by them getting to know you and you getting to know them. So it's all about relationships. And I recently had a coaching call with somebody whose their primary focus is on referrals. And I told that person, I said, you have to I asked them, I said, what, you got a referral from so-and-so, right? Why do you think that person sent you the referral? She tells me, that's my friend. I said, okay, how did they become your friend? And she starts telling me, and I said, well, that sounds kind of one-sided, right? It sounds like they've been taking from you in this relationship. It doesn't sound like you've received anything in return. But now you got a referral from them. You got business from it, right? And I said, that's how you have to go and treat all the people that you reach out to because you want business from them. Don't treat it like I want business from you. Treat it like I'm trying to create a friendship. And when you create friendships and you start to learn their kids' names and you start to find out whether their kid got into college or not, and you start to have conversations with them where you can pick up where you left off the last time, that's when they get an opportunity to send business, they're going to send it to you because you're their friend. And, that's what you have to do is create a network of friends, because that's when the referrals flow back and forth.
Sure. That's a great point. Let's just add to that if you're in a company and there are people below you, you treat them really well, because one day they're going to have their own business and they're going to send you a referral. You got to treat everybody with respect. I don't care if it's the janitor pushing a mop at night. You learn their name. You speak to them like human beings. Everyone's human. Everyone has feelings. You're not getting anywhere by playing tough guy and stepping on people. That's what I've learned.
Unbelievable. That's awesome. So Victor, I don't want to keep you all night. I know that you've kind of gone into your, I don't know if you're retired, but you're doing something for fun now, and you wanted an opportunity to talk about it. So let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. And we might need to give it a little color, because a lot of our listeners are not going to even understand, what goes on behind the scenes. But why don't you tell us what you're up to?
First of all, I'm too young to retire. I'm just tired. There is a need in my community that is not spoken about very much. And I kind of came into it by accident. I was introduced to my wife 31 years ago by a woman who met me at a party, gave me a phone number and said, if you're dating, you should call this woman. So I called her and we were on the phone till like 3:00 in the morning. Now she knew them from when, way back. She didn't know me from Adam. She just saw a guy, looked like a decent guy, put us together, networking. I've always wanted to pay that forward. So I've always had my eyes open, if there's a single here or, someone there that I can possibly network with. Never really clicked. When we married off our last child last month, July 25th.
Well, mazel tov.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I became an empty nester. And because my wife and I work together 10 minutes away, we don't have these huge commutes. I basically support her in her business, whatever she needs. I have a lot of experience. I'm an IT guy, and now I'm an HR guy, and I'm a chief information officer for her, whatever she needs. It's her business. She founded it. She gets all the credit. And we're just enjoying it. But I have more time on my hands. And I love people. I love speaking to people, learning about them, learning their stories. And it occurred to me that there were 6 youngsters, 24 to 36 years of age, in my synagogue, in my little tiny place that has maybe 50 people praying there on Yom Kippur. They're not married and they want to be. And they're not finding any luck finding a suitable match. And in my community, it's very hard to be single, because most of our celebrations, most of our holidays are revolving around family. And it's difficult if a person is never married or divorced or widowed. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice if I could just try to help them? and keep my eyes open and keep my ears open and see if I can find anyone who they might be interested in dating and eventually marrying. I started putting things into a Google spreadsheet just so I could keep track of everyone, keep them in my mind, keep it on my phone. And my spreadsheet grew to about 28 people. And then this happened. And I was being interviewed by a podcast called Meaningful People. Highly recommended, not just because they interviewed me. And the idea struck me because they were saying, well, how does a guy like you become a hero? You know, because I'm just a guy, really. I really am. Very normal. You know, I play fiddle, I play guitar, I play, harmonica. I get along with people, try to. And how does a regular Joe step up and become a hero? And the inspiration struck me, and I said, well, you want to become a hero? Think about the singles that you know in my community. I was speaking to the Jewish Orthodox community, who's mostly who listens to this podcast. And I said, think about them and talk about them. It's a topic that is uncomfortable. It gets swept under the rug. And truly, everybody in my community knows at least 5 singles. And if they don't, I've got some that they can borrow. And if we just start networking together as a community, then these thousands, tens of thousands of people who really want to be married and are feeling frustrated and alone, that those numbers might start to dwindle. And, maybe we can knock those numbers down and make some happy couples. And oh boy, the guy who was leading the podcast challenged me. He says, well, are you willing to give out your own email address and get involved with complete strangers? I said, absolutely. In fact, I'll one-up you and I'll give you my WhatsApp and my cell phone number and call me up. I mean, I'm just one guy. I don't have a secretary doing this. Now I do.
You will soon enough, right?
I do. I have 3 volunteers now. I have to figure out how to make use of them while maintaining privacy. And I insist on having a 10, 15, 20-minute conversation with every single person who I'm going to start setting up, because I need to know who the person is beyond the page. We make resumes of our family and our education and our careers and our peers and our references and, a half-decent picture and, put it out in the ether and hope that somebody matches up. Once I've had that discussion, they go into my spreadsheet, and right now, it's now 3 weeks. Tomorrow's 3 weeks since I found the boy. My spreadsheet exceeds 100 names of complete strangers, except the few I started with. And if I can't find a match on my spreadsheet, then I'm a member of WhatsApp groups that are dedicated to finding matches. Volunteers like myself, and we upload resumes and pictures, and we say, well, what about him for her? What about her for him? We're a bunch of busybodies, I guess, but all well-intentioned, and say, well, no, he's a little short, she's a little far, this might work. Run it by the singles. And all the rules that have grown up in my community as far as, well, you have to get a yes from the boy first, and they shouldn't speak to each other more than 5 minutes on the phone when setting up a date. I say, screw the rules. My 4 kids all got married without going through these rules. One met on an airplane, another met in my design studio, another one met at a class. One of them used the rules, and he was fortunate to get married after 4 or 5 different girls that he dated. These are all blind dates, mind you. And the response has been tremendous. I mean, people who I've known for years, decades. I have a neighbor across the street who now moved away. I saw her this morning. I said, do you know any singles? Because I'm always looking now. And she said, yeah, my son. He's an older single. He never got married. And it's like, how do I not know this? I mean, I know most of her kids. I know what they look like, but nobody's talking about it. So
Right.
I see my job as networking. I'm not the old style shadchan, as they call it, the matchmaker. I had a fiddler on the roof. I'm just networking. I'm giving information. I'll give you a resume and you're like, wait a minute, this guy, really? For me? Is that what you think of me? I'll say, no, that's not what I think of you, but tell me why he's not for you. Tell me why she's a good fit for you. And then the next resume, you close her. And I keep getting closer to the target. And I just want to wrap up this portion with hearing from another volunteer who was very frustrated that she had been doing this for 10 months and not a single thing clicked. And she was getting frustrated and she wanted to quit. And I said, you don't get it. It's not about closing the deal. It's about the networking. It's about making the match. It's about making these older singles feel like somebody gives a damn about them. And maybe they're not in this alone. That's your job. We're just going through the motions here. If you don't think that God is doing the actual networking and making things happen, you're in the wrong business. And I ask for their names, their full Hebrew names, so that I can pray for them. And right now I'm backlogged, probably through the holidays, just getting a hold of all the people that I got to speak to and getting them in the spreadsheet. But I fully expect to be able to connect with all these people, and hopefully I'll merit to have some small part of their journey, or at least be a friend, or help them not feel alone. I mean, it's a human to human contact that I'm offering. I'm not some just old guy talking to young people. I try to be friendly. I try to hear them out. And the one question I ask everyone is, if you didn't have to work, if you didn't have to go to school, if you had no responsibilities, what would you do with yourself? What's your passion? And I think that's a question that we can all ask ourselves. What are we doing? Were we born on this earth to fulfill the curse of Adam, to work by the sweat of our brow? What are we doing here? Right. What are you doing with your life?
Absolutely. Very, very meaningful question. And I wonder how many of our married listeners can answer that. You're only asking the singles the question, but we all need to know the answer to that, right?
That's right.
Pretty incredible. And when we go offline, I have some singles to share with you. This is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating that this is where you went. You're not going to have time to talk to anybody because you're going to be spending your whole day praying, because you've got that list of names that you got to keep in mind in your prayers.
I pray very quickly, like an auctioneer. Oh, one more thing. I just want to add this. My wife was very wise, and she said, you got to make sure that this doesn't overtake your life. So what I did was followed her advice, and I penciled out a certain portion of my day or week that I can devote to this. So I'm not doing it 24/7. I do have a day job. And I used an app called Calendly to schedule my calls. And I got rid of all the defaults. I schedule an 18-minute call. I start my call at, say, 5:28, asking them to be prompt. If they call me and I don't answer, let me get back to them as soon as I can, WhatsApp me, whatnot. But by starting at 5:28, it's not 5:30-ish. It is 5:28. And we're going to go until 5:46 or whatever the math is. If it goes a little longer, no problem. And I only schedule myself after I get home from work from 5:28 till 6:58, and I can take 3 calls a night, and I'm only doing it on Mondays and Wednesdays. The rest of the time is my time. And if I need more, I can call people, but if they want to schedule some time with me, this is where I give them a link, and looking forward to speaking with you.
Right. Yeah. And I, this leads back to setting boundaries, which is so crucial. And we're all so poor at setting boundaries, and especially the community that we're talking to lawyers. And lawyers, some of your listeners are going to take offense at this, but the reality is that if you're working more than 40 hours a week, you have trouble setting boundaries. Probably more than 30 hours a week, you have trouble setting boundaries, because peak productivity is reached to 24 hours a week. Studies show that. So anything beyond that, and you're really spinning your wheels for no reason. But let's just make it 40, or pick a number that you're comfortable with, that's what you want to work, and then set the boundary. The same thing that Victor's doing with his recreational activity, the thing that he's doing on the side, right? Create those boundaries, because it's what creates room for all the other important parts of your life. And you went back to work-life balance earlier, and I think that there's so many pieces that we talked about, but work-life balance is so crucial. And there's only so long that you can go before you run out of motivation to continue doing what you're doing because you've neglected everything else important to you. And what is the cost of admission? Like, some people are like, well, I'm doing this for my family. But then you turn around 5 years later, you've neglected your family, you've neglected your spouse. And now you're going through a divorce and you only see your kids once every week or whatever it is. And where are you? Like, did you really do that for your family? Like, is that really where you wanted to end up? But we don't see that happening as it's happening. And it all comes from setting boundaries. So I think you're very wise in doing that. But I also think there's a lesson to be learned from what you're sharing. The other thing that you mentioned earlier is on the podcast, you were asked about being a hero. And it struck me that we had a conversation in the green room before we started. And we were talking about this idea of your moment of fame, right? And the reality is that you did not get into a car and drive to search for this boy because you wanted to be famous, right? That wasn't your motivation. That wasn't what you were after. And the fact that your name has come out as the person who instigated finding him, and that you're getting the interviews on the podcast and you're having this moment of fame, the reality is that 6 weeks from now, 6 months from now, nobody's going to remember who Victor Shine is, right?
Works for me.
And exactly. But the point is that we always have to keep an eye on the prize. We always have to keep an eye on the goal that we're after. Along the way of trying to achieve that goal, something else is going to come that's going to be shiny. It's going to be exciting. It's going to seem like, oh, wow, this is it. I've made it. But when it's not what we actually were intending to go after, if we latch onto that and we try to make that the thing, that will die out, it will go away, and then we're going to be left with nothing to show for it because we didn't continue what we're after. And that's where I think not just the fact that you're thrilled for nobody to know who you are, right? But the reality is that everything seems, like you can see in this story how everything happens for a reason. In Hebrew, they call it hashgacha pratis, but it's divine inspiration, right? There's this act of God. There's the controlling force that's making this all happen. Maybe you were chosen to be the person to find him so that you can get the spotlight, so that you can build your list of singles and help people get married and find each other. And my guess is, with your IT background, that an app is not far behind, and being able to do better algorithms at finding people to match with each other. You're gonna advance from a spreadsheet very quickly. I can see that already. But if you have, I'm sure that's what you've thought about that already. I'm sure that your mind already went there. But it's pretty incredible, not just your story, but how we can now take the parallels of this and just figure out where are the places where I might be going wrong? Where am I not taking action? Where have I lost where have I lost sight of what I'm trying to achieve? Where's my meaning? What do I want? How do I create this work-life balance so that I'm not only trying to achieve the goals specifically for the business, but I'm also trying to achieve it within the confines of the rest of my life? And I think that that's a great place for us to end this discussion. I'm just going to give you, Victor, one last opportunity to just share some, if you have one piece of advice to share with our listeners from this experience, from your own experience in the past, from your future experience you haven't even experienced yet. What's one piece of advice that you'd want to leave our listeners with?
Wow, you could have given me that, a few weeks ago, so I'd have time to prepare an answer.
I like to put people on the spot. It gets me the real, true, authentic answer. You don't get to really think about it. You just throw it out there.
I have a couple of things that are rattling around my brain right now. First of all, I know it sounds funny.
I'll allow more than one.
I mean, my wife always told my kids, always try, be the best. If you're going to be a loser in this life, be the best damn loser there is. That's her philosophy. Mine has always been the key to happiness is lowered expectations. And I know that's counterintuitive, but, killing yourself for what? So you have a designer label, which sounds funny coming from someone who owns a design label. But, what did that cost you? What was the opportunity cost of, um, you know, driving yourself nuts, you know, of making drama, of making other people feel badly about themselves? I found that just changing my expectations of others doesn't change me from having good expectations about myself. It's not my job to make anyone else better. I'm not their rabbi. I'm not their priest. I'm not their father. Even my kids, it's not, they're grown now. So it's not my place to decide what other people should be, should do, shouldn't do. I guess it's just, try to be a little more chill if you can. Don't kill yourself over things that don't deserve your worry. Your worry's not going to change anything. Set your plan, go about it. Don't worry if it's working or not working. Just do the best you can. Give it the effort that it deserves, and hopefully everything will work out. And if you're religious, pray, and if you're not, get religious.
Love it. Love it.
I was not always religious. I became religious at my bar mitzvah.
Well, we'll have to dive into that on another episode, right? Victor, it's really been a pleasure having you here. I appreciate you being open and talking about not just the story, but your own experiences, and you clearly have a lot to share. And my listeners are fortunate that somehow I didn't share how I got this. So my daughter forwarded me this audio clip that I played at the beginning of this episode, and she forwarded it into our family chat saying, "This is from the person who found the little boy." And I didn't know about the story at all, and I was like, "What is she talking about?" And I just listened to the audio clip. And then I went and Googled for the story, and I got the backstory. And the whole story just amazed me, as I'm sure it amazed anybody who listened at the beginning. And I immediately sent a message back into the group saying, tagging Mimi, my daughter, who's also the producer of this podcast. And I said, "Mimi, you have to find this person." But then when I went and Googled the news articles, I was able to find your name. So then I went back and I said, "His name is Victor Schein. Now go find how to contact him." And like 20 minutes later, she came back with an email address and a phone number. And I said, no, I'm not calling him. You call him, you book him on the show, and I'm going to have the conversation. So here we are. But really, it's this whole thing has been incredible, and this is gonna be a great episode, and people are gonna love it, and they're going not just love it, but they're actually going to learn from it and hopefully take action from it. So folks, if you did enjoy this episode, I encourage you to take it and share it with somebody else that can benefit from it as well, because the biggest thank you that you can give to Victor is by helping another person. And when we start to create this chain of helping others, don't have the bystander effect. Don't say, "Oh, somebody else is going to share it." Take the episode. Take the action now. Take the episode, share it with somebody else, because they're going to listen to it, and then they're going to enjoy it, and they're going to take it and they're going to share it with somebody else. And that creates this beautiful world where we're always out there helping other people. And when you help somebody else, you don't do it to get something else in return, but it always comes back to you in some way, shape, or form. And I think that if we get into this mode of constantly helping others, that is going to ultimately be the best way to grow our business, grow our life in a meaningful way. And we get to have our happy endings, wherever that is.
I'm just want to say I'm very grateful to you and to Mimi for hosting me on your podcast. I also want to put a short plug in here. If you hear the advertisers on this podcast, you should let them know where you heard. And you should use their services, because it's only because of their support that the Amsels are able to put out quality programming. for your entertainment. And it's important that you let them know that, hey, I heard you on Amsel's podcast. Good job. Thanks for that.
Victor, I appreciate it. I appreciate you. Let's keep in touch. I think this is going to be,
Sure.
This is not going to be a one-time conversation. So I'm looking forward to our next opportunity to connect, and we're not far from each other. I'm in Rockland County, New York. So, we can get together at some point as well, meet in person if the opportunity allows it. But folks, we're here twice a week, every Tuesday and every Thursday, and I'm really excited to have you again next Tuesday. So if you're enjoying this show, make sure you hit the subscribe button and subscribe to it. And the last thing is if you're really loving it, leave us a rating and review. Other people come and they check out the show and they want to know, should I listen? Should I not listen? And they look at the ratings and reviews. And the same people are out there looking for a lawyer, and they're going on Google and they're trying to decide whether to use you based on your rating and review. So the same way that you want your clients to leave you a rating and review, I would love my listeners to leave us one as well. Please go and do that. We will be forever grateful. Victor, thank you so much. Folks, we'll catch you on the next show. Take care. That's it for this week's episode of Profit with Law. If you have enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with at least one person. Imagine how many lives we can change if we each shared this episode. Another way to share the episode is on social media. We appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us again next week.